Hi there, Yoav, and hello, everybody. I'm Sid Ganis, and I'm a industry guy. I've been in the industry all my career, it seems. Not it seems, all my career since I was a kid. And I'm now no longer a kid, but very happily a participant in the work that Yoav is doing these days on Among Neighbors. And it's been a long road for me, but man, am I happy to be here. And Yoav, the one thing I wanted to start off by saying to you is this very morning I opened my San Francisco Chronicle, not expecting to see anything except, political stuff and what's going on around the city. And there you were in a
That's great.
very
Thanks,
good,
Sid.
and the reason I'm even bringing it up now is because it was a thoughtful piece about the film. Nice about you, but a really thoughtful piece about Among Neighbors. And it's good to see it when somebody kind of gets it. I think the guy said, yeah, plenty of Holocaust movies, but man, nothing like this one. And that was good for me to read and see. It made me feel good.
Thank you. Me too. I mean, it's great to get that kind of coverage, and I am really thankful that the author understood that this film is really different than anything you've seen
Yeah,
that relates to the Holocaust. It's in a number of ways. I mean, for one, the story shifts the focus from this is what the horrible Germans did to the poor helpless Jews. That's what we expect from a Holocaust film.
right, right.
And this film is really about the relationship between uh, Polish Jews and their Polish Catholic neighbors. And that's a story that spans centuries. And those relationships were really profound. Um, and we get at the tragic part of that relationship as well, which includes the fact that some Holocaust survivors were murdered by their Polish neighbors after the war was over and it was supposedly peacetime.
Yeah.
And then the other key way that the film, I think, is different and that the journalist understood was the way it uses animation to really take you inside of the stories and just deliver something to the audience that's both moving and hopefully visually quite striking and effective. So, I'm very, very grateful for that coverage. Boy, it's hard to get media coverage on a documentary these days, as you know, and
There,
that's
there are plenty of fine documentaries around, and then there's yours, which is absolutely fine, and even beyond that, really extraordinary. And because of the way you just described your own movie, um, that's part of the reason. I mean, this is a complicated relationship between Poles, forget Jews, Catholics, between people, between Poles, and uh, where there is right and there is right, and then all of a sudden the tables are turned, and therefore it has its own tension associated with it, and that's the way I looked at it too. It was a story that we knew historically how it turned out. And then there was this part that I knew nothing about, Poles versus Poles, so to speak. And that's what's making your film extraordinary and great.
well, thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, I want to speak about the film in a way that doesn't, give anything away for anyone watching who hasn't seen it. Um, but also talk a little bit about, why I chose to make it, what the process was, how the story unfolded. Um, because I had resistance to a Holocaust story, a quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust film myself. I came towards this with the knowledge that people feel like, okay, there's been lots and lots of Holocaust
Sure.
films. There couldn't possibly be anything new to do in that area. And so the way I came to make this film, despite those reservations, is our friend, she's a friend of yours too, Anita Friedman,
Yeah.
invited me to go to Poland to film in what was her father's little tiny town. And the reason she was doing that was because she had arranged for a rededication of the Jewish cemetery there, and she wanted someone to document it. And so she knew me as a San Francisco Bay Area filmmaker, invited me to do that. And then,
So it was almost
yeah,
like a sense of innocence, right? I mean, you just wanted to have the document. Is
yeah.
that
And at that point, it wasn't, neither of us was thinking about a feature film. But when I decided, okay, I'm going all the way to Poland. Let me not only film the ceremony that you want me to document, but I'll also spend a little time in this town and try to talk to the oldest people I can find there to see can they remember what it was like when Jews were their neighbors? Because this town used to be about two-thirds Jewish, its population, and today, of course, there were none.
right?
And so filming those interviews with the oldest people in the town, I heard stories about the Jewish, non-Jewish kind of symbiotic relationships, how they used to play with Jewish children in the streets, they used to
Mhm.
frequent the Jewish shops. But the thing that really struck me was one woman admitted that well after the war, Holocaust survivors who came stumbling back into their hometown were murdered
Yeah,
by locals.
yeah.
And that just really struck me as strikingly different than anything I had seen in a Holocaust film. And
And
so I just,
impossible to think about, right? Am I right about that? How could that possibly be so? That
it is really shocking and disturbing. And yet I'll also add that, I had read about that prior to going to Poland. And it hadn't affected me in the same way as hearing it from a Polish person who was
Mhm.
alive at the time and to some extent witnessed it with her own eyes. And it was hearing it in that way that really struck me, not reading it in a book.
Right.
So that's when I decided, okay, this is going to be a documentary. And my vision for the film was reborn for the first time. And I say it that way because it
Yeah.
was then reborn two more times um, along the way. Um, and if you like, I could go on to explain those two other times.
Oh, definitely. You have to
Uh,
explain those two other times. Of
all
course you
right, great. So I became a little obsessed with this town after hearing about its dark secret and also getting a real rich sense of what the life had been like before the war. And for about a year, I was really investing in telling that story, the story of this town. And at that point, I was envisioning it as a half-hour documentary based
do.
on, the scope of the story I had. And the various historical agencies in Poland got to know me because I was in touch with them to explain what I was doing and looking for photographs or any records or anything that would relate to this town. And lo and behold, about a year to the day from when I began, one of those organizations, called the Jewish Historical Institute, which is in Warsaw, Poland, they received a handwritten letter from a woman who said she spent much of her childhood in that town, that she was a direct eyewitness to the post-war murders that took place there, that she was coming forward now to tell her story, and she wanted someone to help her find the boy from who was the son of two of the victims in those murders, because she knew that he had survived, and she always wondered, where was he now? Did
Yeah.
he make it out of Poland alive? And she just knew instinctively he would want to know what she had witnessed.
Hmm.
So soon, we filmed interviews with her. We got her story. Her story kind of came flooding out of her
Oh
because
boy.
I soon found out that this was a woman who was was an eyewitness to these murders, was traumatized by having witnessed them, and had been holding back on
Yeah.
telling her story because the killers had threatened her, and she waited them out, and they had just passed away.
Hmm.
And so now, 70 years later, she was finally safe.
Amazing.
And so her story was amazing. It took me a little time to really fully understand it because it came, rushing out of her, not in chronological order and in Polish.
Oh.
So in the editing room, it was really a lot of work to connect everything and get the flow and realize when she remembered something from before the war and then started talking about what that same place was like after the war, to be able to, sort of separate those pieces out and then put it in chronological order. But once I had done that and sort of put together the puzzle of her story, I realized this woman had an incredible story. It was full of rich, vivid detail and emotion because she really cared for her Jewish neighbors, and she was not Jewish herself, and sympathized with them and had a crush on that boy. And so there was just so much richness there. And yet, as I was editing it, I found myself coming up against kind of a wall with trying to tell her story only with her interview, archival footage, and moody B-roll of the town.
This is where you, as the filmmaker, say, "Oh my God." You say one of two things: "Damn," or "There's got to be a way to solve this."
Exactly. Yeah, there had to be a way, and so we tried animation as the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and put together some scenes, some of the most sort of crucial scenes from her story. And I actually did a test screening here in the Bay Area in Berkeley for a group of about 50 people, and was a little bit on pins and needles myself, thinking, what are they going to think of the animation? And people just loved it and gave me the big green light to go forward with it. And so we did. And the approach to the animation that I came up with was that it should be mostly in black and white.
Hmm.
It should be hand drawn because
Hmm.
that's going to work so much better to fit with the time period. Both the black and white and the hand drawn will fit with the time period much better than something that's in color and it's CG, right? Computer generated.
Hmm.
It would just feel out of place, and that kind of material wouldn't cut well with archival footage. And I wanted to be able to just cut back and forth from animation to
Yeah.
archival footage in a real seamless way.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, I think the biggest leap we made with it was to decide this is not a reenactment tool. It's a way to go inside of these people's memories. And the difference is we can do things that are unreal, that are really more towards magical realism
Hmm.
to show you how this moment feels for the person who's
Hmm.
narrating the story.
Right. It,
So, yeah,
yeah, I was only going to say that it turns out that you scored. I mean, it blends, it's organic. The magical realism is important to me, the audience. It helps me along in trying to understand what these people were knowing and feeling back then. And of course, the animation, the beautiful, beautiful animation, your work, your specific filming and interviews and work you did around that town, uh, both in terms of setting the stage, is a great. And then your animator popped in with this beautiful additional um, thread
Right.
through this whole movie, and such a great. I said organic before. I'll say it again. Organic, simple way, straight ahead.
Thanks. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Uh, and so for the next 3 years, I was charging full steam ahead
Oy.
to make sort of that version of the film where this woman, whose name is Pelagia, she became the heart of the film, the center of the film. Everything I had been filming prior now was kind of like a Greek chorus around her and supporting her story. And then when we were nearly done, or I thought I was nearly done making that film, I looked back at something from the very first day I had spent in the town, which was that rededication of the Jewish cemetery.
Uh-huh.
And on the printed program that Anita had made for that ceremony was some artwork. And it said that it was by a folk artist who was born in the little town. And then I found out that that artist lived to be 102. He gained some fame and notoriety for his paintings of what was now an extinct form of Jewish life. And I decided to make a scene about him. And luckily for me, an Academy Award-winning duo, Ali Light and Irving Saraf, both of them of blessed memory now,
Mm-hmm.
they had made a film about that 102-year-old artist. So there was
Mm-hmm.
good footage I could borrow to tell
Mm-hmm.
the story of that 102-year-old painter from this very same town. And when I got in touch with his family, they told me, hey, we have a Holocaust survivor in our family who's still alive, and you need to talk to him. And so that now was an amazing discovery for me because I was 4 years into this project, and this was the first living Holocaust survivor from the town. And I knew he would be able to tell his story of the same place from the Jewish perspective. And then once I got in touch with him, his name is Yaakov Goldstein. I realized pretty quickly, wow, he has an amazing story. And without giving anything away, I'll just say I realized that his story was so beautiful and powerful that I would need to animate it in much the same
Mm-hmm.
way as I already had been with Pelagia. Um, and that I was now going to, the way I always think about it is it's like I had been building a bus in a garage, and now I was going to take the bus apart piece by piece and then rebuild it as a double-decker bus with a Pelagia level and a Yakov level. And those were the two halves of the story that we really needed because we had the Polish woman's perspective, a non-Jewish perspective, and the eyewitness perspective. And then we had the Jewish Holocaust survivor telling his story, and they were both from the very same place. But that was a huge
Thank
endeavor.
goodness you had the guts to do it, man. Taking a bus apart and building a whole other deck on it, man.
Well, I think us filmmakers, we trick ourselves
Yes.
and
You
we tell
do.
ourselves, "Oh, this will only take," and I said to myself, this is a big endeavor, but it's worth it. It will only take a year." And it only took about 5 years, but it was worth it. And I also I should, certainly credit the two editors who worked with me, collaborated with me in editing this, Lauren Schwartzman and Aaron Butler.
Yes.
And then the animators, there were actually two pretty large teams. And I intentionally had two separate teams, one for Pelagia's story and one
And
for Yakov's
I put
story.
story, sure. Sure.
And the idea was, from a production workflow, that would work better, but also each of their memories should have a little bit of a different
Yeah.
look. so
Yeah.
that at any point in the film, as soon as we cut to animation from Yaakov's story, you know we're in his story. And then the same is true for Pelagia. When we cut to her animation, we
You
know
know where you are. Yep.
that's right.
You know
That's
where
right.
you are. Successfully. You know where you are successfully. Take it from me, your audience. Um, Good going, man. It's really great. And now, this is the moment of a certain kind of truth. There you are in the world, and we know for sure. I've had the experience myself of seeing it play to an audience of people who walked into a film festival basically not. I'm not basically not knowing really much about your story. There was a poster and a kind of a log line in the film festival catalog, and that was it. And it wasn't a Jewish crowd or a non-Jewish crowd, it was moviegoers. And I sat there and I was at that film festival for a whole other reason. Yoav, it wasn't to be there for Among Neighbors. It was there for to be there for another film that a friend of mine had done. Yet I sat there and watched an audience react to this and watched them gasp in astonishment at what they saw. So, way to go.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think, maybe to wrap up, I'll say, for audiences going into this film, I mean, the advice I can give you, and then to some extent the sales pitch I'll give you, is expect the unexpected.
Yeah, good.
Because
Well,
it's a different kind of film. It's even if you know it's related to the Holocaust, it's very different than anything you've ever seen that relates to the Holocaust, both in terms of where the story is focused and the artistic approach that we've been discussing. And then there's lots of ways that the story is incredibly relevant. It's only becoming more relevant today with the attacks on how we look at our history with
right.
certain people, both in Poland and here in the United States and in many countries, trying to decide, oh, well, this is the part of history that
Yeah,
we're going to tell, and this is what gets to be at the Smithsonian, and this other stuff doesn't get to be there. And the film really shows audiences that it's very important that we look in history in totality, that we look at the things we're proud of and the things
we're
that
not
we as
proud
a
of it.
society or a country perhaps should maybe even be ashamed of, or at least they're worth re-examining, they're worth knowing so that we can improve as nations, as societies. But there's a lot of pushback from people that want to just live in a kind of patriotic
Mhm.
fantasy land version of history. And the film speaks to that in a really direct way, and I think in a really universal way, such that, as you were saying, audiences of all shades and
Yeah,
colors and stripes
yeah,
can understand that message that comes through loud and clear, and also relate to just these very human journeys, primarily of these two people who lived through something really incredible and challenging and difficult, and in as many ways as possible overcame that trauma and are really beautiful people to witness on screen. And I'm grateful that I got to meet them and that I got to document their stories in this film.
thanks, Yoav.
Oh, thank you, Sid. It's my pleasure.